Welcome back to the Power to Build show, where we explore the trends, technologies, and people shaping the future of home building. I'm Bryan, joined today by Marco. Marco, great to have you back from your trip to Italy.
Thanks, Bryan. Yeah, great to be back, and I'm especially excited for today's episode. We're focusing on customer experience, and we're joined by Danielle Feidler from Fired Up Culture. She's a leader in customer experience and strategy with deep roots in the home building industry.
Yeah, super excited. Danielle's worked on both the builder and consulting sides. And, today we're diving into how builders can create loyalty and elevate their overall customer experience, even in a slower market.
Thanks, Bryan. Oh my gosh, Marco and Bryan, I am so happy to be here. This is one of my favorite topics, or is the favorite topic for me.
So Danielle, before we dive into the challenges builders are facing today, let's set the stage a little bit. For those who may not be familiar with customer experience or CX, can you give us a quick overview of what Fired Up Culture does and your role as principal?
At Fire Up Culture, our whole mission is to help not just builders, but developers, construction management teams, as well as adjacent affiliated industries like flooring, other manufacturing that our industry is dependent on, to evolve a culture of what I would say of service excellence or of customer experience. Emphasis on the word culture. And when I say that, that means every single person in the organization generally is adding value to the customer experience in some way or form, whether it's someone in accounting or your traditional frontline staff that is out selling, the homes in the community. It's ensuring that every single person in the organization understands their role, how the impact they have on the customer experience, and that they're empowered to do things to improve it and make it outstanding. As principal, I partner with usually leadership first to understand sort of where they're coming at in their journey of customer experience. Some have traditionally viewed it as something that's at the end of the traditional development process, and others in a more mature model are seeing it more holistically. But in my role, I guide the leadership and the teams to understanding and bringing and delivering that outstanding customer experience to every interaction that they have in the organization with their homeowners. And I'd say first and foremost, it's also making sure the voice of the customer is heard inside the organization. And I think we're going to get into that a little bit more. So essentially, that's what I do.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Danielle. Love everything that you're doing. Wanted to kind of bring it down to ground level, get right into it. Imagine a mid-sized production builder in today's market, right? Sales are obviously a little bit slower at this time. Buyers are a bit more hesitant, and the team is kind of stretched thin. They're doing the basics right, but something's missing in how they connect with customers. In that sort of environment, what's the first mindset shift you'd recommend to help them move from, more of a reactive problem solving into more of a proactive loyalty building approach? Like, can you share some perspective on that?
And Bryan, I just want to come back at you. When you say loyalty, I think I'm always looking, loyalty means I'll buy again, but advocacy means I'm going to be out there talking to everybody and their neighbors saying, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what my builder just did for me, or my, my new home experience was. So I think the magic happens when you have both high advocacy and high loyalty. But back to your question about the mid-sized builder, I have a million questions about, is this their first project? Is it their 50th? How many projects do they have on the go? But if I put all that aside, if you're saying first, I think fundamental to the customer experience is the relationship equity you're building every step of the way. And I think, Marco, you and I talked about this. I said, of all the things developers and builders do, they think of it as the bricks and mortar, but it's the customer's trust is what is valued and most important. You have a high trust customer, they will generally give you a lot of leeway with supply chain challenges and, even deficiency issues that may occur in your home. They understand we're in a complicated business. But I think the communication, when I talk about building relationship equity, communication is your number one, let's say, tool in your toolbox. I think keeping the homeowner engaged throughout the entire project lifecycle, even if I didn't have another dollar to spend and I might have issues like the HVAC isn't working or certain things that are crisis related, all your customers are calling you upset. no matter where I start out with when and how have you communicated? Have you told them this is an issue that you have, and frankly that you're not going to be able to resolve it for the next 2 months? That, how bear with us while we respond. We have a high volume of issues. Honesty is generally, and transparency is generally the best policy in those situations, which I find a lot of developers, they're being honest, but they avoid or delay pain. If they don't want
No,
to
I see that,
communicate bad
Danielle.
news.
When we speak with, I was speaking with a builder, and they were like, we have to set expectations, and they were saying, on our surveys, we do take care of the surveys for our builders.
Right.
On our surveys, they're scoring us low on, was our home delivered clean inside, and how was, the state of our home when we moved in, and they were getting low scores, and that was because their entire subdivision was under construction still, and the main thing we were able to share with them was, as long as you share with them the fact that we're not going to be able to install your grass once your neighbor's house is complete, then they'll be okay with it. It's just communicating that to them from the beginning and letting them know, because then if that's the case, they won't be upset. However, they were expecting to move into a brand new home, with a park that was complete. So just keeping that, like setting expectations and communicating that to them along the way, that's where I kind of see things
Yeah.
as being very important for builders.
I love that. And I would say beyond setting expectations, there's the word in front of it. It's managing and setting expectations. So I think JD Power had, when they did their study, showed that the penalty you pay for not enough communication was huge instead of, for your
Yeah.
CSAT scores and things. Whereas over communication, you might just lose like a half a point. So the investment in keeping your homeowners informed, even with difficult situations, they might not be happy about it, but they can understand your rationale, like trade delays or supply chain issues, and then generally give them the date when you're going to be able to fix it. And if you're not able to meet that, call them in advance, not after it's passed. So they feel like they're your quality control or your customer service department, that they have to stay on top of you. So
Yeah.
back to Bryan, I think you used the word proactive, or when we were talking, all of these things, if you stay ahead of the curve and keep the homeowner
Mm-hmm.
involved, you can really shape that sort of promoter detractor kind of mindset. And I love, Marco, it must have been passive that you were going after, I would think. But the idea that finding out the why your customers feel the way they do, that's a conversation. And they'll tell you.
Yeah.
They want to tell you and they want you involved. So agree with that.
Of course. And then also when it comes to customer experience and what it looks like in practice, you mentioned, setting expectations, communicating throughout the way. What are some smart tactics you've seen builders implement, throughout their process to help improve, let's say communication or, customer experience as a whole?
So when you ask me that, I think the majority of people would think tactics that are going to be directly with the customer. But as I mentioned before, it's not, most developers see the process as a linear one that's often very transactional, things that are happening inside the organization that in their mind, it doesn't affect the customer or doesn't really impact what their view of delivering the experience is. I dial all the way back. One of my first tactics are, how are the trades being treated? Are the trades being
Mm-hmm.
paid on time? Happy trades build happy homes. Employees, are employees trained at a level that they can actually respond and are empowered to act on issues that are happening in the community? So some of the tactics would be starting from the accounting team, having them understand the importance of what they're doing in terms of impacting that end of the line experience. I mentioned training of the employees. Oftentimes our employees, one of the, Marco, I think you and I were talking about this, is, it was a tenant that had come into a customer experience office. And as far as the customer experience rep was concerned, they only deal with owners. That was the process the developer had in place, and that's fine. But that renter or tenant is the next buyer of your home. So this idea of a tactic is every interaction matters. And let me even dial back when you say a tactic and fundamentals is, how do we define customer? When I
Mm-hmm.
go into an organization and I ask that question, I generally will get 10 different answers. A finance person is going to be the one who pays. It's the only one at the end of the chain that gives you the money. There's only one customer. And I would say more and more in the world of mature customer experience, it's the homeowner, it's the renters, it's the neighboring community, it's the trades, it's the employees. It's a virtuous circle that every interaction matters because in order to bring joy into an experience and an intentional experience where every detail is thought of, you need to be looking at the entire, sort of circle and cycle. And then the other tactics, I think that was the honest question you were asking me, tactics at the back end. I think I was sharing with you giving little unexpected extras or glue. And glue are things like that. When I met you in sales, I made note of the fact that you had two 4-pod furry family members. And at the time of PDI, I'm able to, give you, or even at design, I'm able to recommend durable flooring that
Right.
would, last longer for you. At PDI, I might have, little paw protectors for the pets or clothing, leaving dog treats. One of the other things I'd also mention too is looking for ways to say yes. We are so hardwired to be moving along a very procedural, I'm going to say safety driven, which safety is always first, agree with that. But one example I can give you that was like at the level of a Ritz-Carlton or Nordstrom's kind of legendary service is, and I almost missed this opportunity too, by the way, was a young gentleman wanted to propose to his fiance in the suite, but the suite wasn't going to PDI or turn over early enough. So we asked if he could get in early. And of course, in
Nice.
the frontline side, we say, no, our process is safety. The house isn't ready yet. And I was like, it worked its way up to me because this gentleman was resolute. And at a senior executive level, I questioned the team saying, we there was a way to say yes. Yes, our standard policy is not to, but this was so important and so unique.
Mhm.
I think you said in the Gadara model or the bear and the forks, Gadara refers to this as one size fits one. This was a tremendously unique opportunity to do something that was fairly low lift, wasn't going to cost us a lot of money, and we did it. And oh my God, he posted us on social, and she said yes, by the way.
Oh,
um,
that's good.
but it was something that was surprise, delight, didn't cost us a lot, and it had a huge impact, and it became a story, a culture, a myth within our company, but also within that community. So I think there's a lot of tactics. And they're not expensive. That's the thing. It could even just be a phone call saying, I know you have a newborn. We're about to do some sound testing. Maybe you want to leave for the day. Working with your property management teams. I'm going to go back to Bryan, thoughtful, intentional, proactive. It doesn't
Hmm.
leveraging technology. I'm not talking about big money tactics, though you can
Right.
spend money. We can definitely spend some money at times. But I think at the end of the day, the money we spend goes back to you get referrals, you get
Yep.
advocacy, and you actually, in my opinion, and this is netted out, I think, Marco, you can probably demonstrate this with some data, but overall, happy homeowners report less deficiencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
actually got to tracking the data. I'm a data hound. I believe in measuring everything, but I was able to demonstrate 30% of our customers, and they weren't just investors, never reported a post. And this was a mature client experience or customer experience model. But if you have 30% of the people never reporting one post, you're saving a lot of, I think, money there, time, effort. And yeah, it's just to a better end result.
Yeah. What an awesome moment for that couple. And sort of speaking about standout moments, right? You had mentioned previously about the bear and a specific scene about the polishing forks. For those who
Yes.
haven't seen it, it's a very powerful metaphor for how even the smallest details can reflect a company's culture and commitment to service. Can you talk about how that sort of mindset translates into what we do home building?
Oh, for sure. In fact, I love Gadara and the bear and that forks analogy. For those of you who haven't seen it, look it up online on YouTube. Just do the bear, the forks, and you'll see the scene. But there's a moment where the training person or the manager is talking to this young person that or middle-aged person that thinks the spot on the fork doesn't matter. And he's like, whoa, dude, at any given point in time, we have 250 different things in orbit, and we're looking to deliver an amazing meal to people who have waited months to have this experience. And it's the Super Bowl every day. To bring in that kind of inspired, committed, it's a model I've used and created some time ago, but inspired, committed, extraordinary service into every interaction. I would say something as simple for developers is keep it clean. I might not be able to have your blinds in by the time of PDI or closing, and I might not be able to have even something as important as an appliance. But cleanliness is next to godliness in my mind, is something like if I'm bringing in every detail matters. Coffee cups, cigarette butts. I call it being home ready and community ready. And construction is always doing their best to deliver the highest quality product on time and at the highest finish possible. But we're in seasonal businesses and we're in Mother Nature's furnace. So when push comes to shove and we have to still do PDIs in a less than optimal environment, what we look for is creating a path, whatever path it is. It might be through the front door, it might be through the garage, but that path is visually clean.
Gotcha. I mean, yeah, that's key. And everything you've kind of shared has helped segue into our next segment where we're going to kind of look at all of those things that you mentioned were going to be key to improving customer experience and ensuring your homeowners are happy. But how can, tech tools and touch points really drive better customer experience? So when we talk tech and we look at what digital tools, you've seen builders help deliver high ROI for CX teams, what are some kind of, for example, what are tools you've seen builders implement to achieve a higher ROI on customer experience?
Mm-hmm. Um, there's tools that you're going to be using at every stage. So if I were to start off and say the first thing would be a good customer relationship management system. And oftentimes that smaller builder, Bryan, that you mentioned at the beginning, they might not have the kind of money to invest in that kind of thing out of the gate, but then track it on an Excel spreadsheet. Know your customer, know who you're dealing with, give a place and an intention, a repository to track the kind of information we just alluded to. Single female that parents live overseas. English is not a first language, has two dogs, home is being used for child going to university. Any of those segmentations, I think, are really important to track up front. And I call that a segmentation called extra customer care. So is it a multi-purchase client? Is it one of your brokers who have bought by the floor? Is it a consulting? So that would be your insider VIP. Is it somebody that at the point of sale is, I call them extra quality conscious, very affectionately. I think this is the person who took 6 months to close the deal, and maybe in design, instead of doing 2 appointments, they had 20. You don't want at PDI to be matching up an extra quality conscious person or maybe those VIPs with someone who is of that level of need. People who have been litigious, people who have already might have special needs, like might need an assistive device. Those are the kinds of things upfront, managing a CRM, knowing who your customers are, segmenting and talking to them in the way they need to be talked to in a thoughtful and intentional way. So CRM would be one. Leveraging tools like, well, we were mentioning earlier, surveying. I think
Right.
oftentimes builders will have technology, but there's no strategy behind the technology. So I was working with somebody who had invested heavily in having a survey tool. But Marco, to go back through the promoters, passives, and detractors, they only chase the detractors. So if someone was yelling or screaming at them on Google reviews or in their survey, they never talked to the passives or the promoters. And I was like, in the first assessment with them, I was like, where's your strategy? You've invested in this beautiful tool, but the passives where you have 60%, your detractors, they were actually doing great. They only had like 2%. They were missing all that wonderful information to hear what the customer's issues were. And maybe it was just a communication to fix it. So they'd be out there raving fans, that promoter. So I think coming back to a good CRM, a good survey tool that monitors every single stage of the way, but in behind both of those things, always having a good sort of strategy that's in behind it and people understanding how the technology is supposed to be leveraged to improve the customer experience. That's often missing. So in the 110-100 rule, the idea is to track things early. And oftentimes when I've gone in, developers are only tracking things from the PDI forward. They're, what I would call, I divided it into 3 sections. There's the construction issues, there's the pre-issues, and the con, and looking at it in 3. And con being anything that's happening before the PDI. Pre being at the PDI forward to occupancy, and post being everything after closing forward. well into the third, fourth year. So tracking those kinds of issues that are coming into the system, ideally, once you've had some experience, you can proactively eliminate a significant number of them just by planning intentionally ahead, having additional quality checks, knowing what types of things to check on a quality check,
Hmm.
building into your model what I would call preventative maintenance and tying that into your PDI and post occupancy process. The third one, I think, or the last one, actually, this is the fourth one, is a portal, a form of portal a homeowner can use. Remember, we talked about staying in communication with your homeowners? That
Yeah.
doesn't always have to be a one-to-one exchange tying in a resource. There was a really great study that was done. It was why our customers don't want to talk to you. And do you guys ever do you ever go to the teller anymore? Like when you go to TD Bank or RBC or,
Once a
Very
year,
rarely.
probably. When I lose
okay.
my debit card, that's when I go.
Okay, seriously. So now picture you're standing, and I've done this and I've caught myself. I'm standing in line for the ATM machine and there's no line inside, but I still, with the teller, but nobody goes in and to use the teller. And I find that this is a perfect example of the beauty of portals or leveraging technology in a really smart way. Oftentimes, I can be like booking my hairdresser, doing other work, answering emails while I'm waiting in line. It's allowing homeowners to self-solve and interact with that high investment person to person when it's necessary. But if you leverage things like portals, allow them to access information, submit requests, track their requests, you will find you'll save. Let me just put it this way: you will not reduce your headcount, because I always like, how many people can we reduce through these kinds of mechanisms? It's not so much reducing headcount, but it's the ability to build stronger that relationship equity, allowing them to access information when and how they want to through technology, but then saving the in-person high touch ones in areas where I can have a high impact and
Right.
get the ROI back out of it for that person to person contact, because that is the most expensive thing, and have
Yeah.
it lead to a better end result.
Yeah, for
Do you
sure.
happen do we happen to know what the name of that survey platform was?
I would and this is again, this is no false plug, but one of my favorite ones is through Customer Insight. Recently, because it's actually a pretty mature developer who does not really have internal KPIs. They've always just they've scaled really quickly and almost tripled in size. But instead of going for internal KPIs, I'm really pushing the external. Hear the voice of the customer first, and then work backwards in. And they will tell you the first priorities, the second priorities, and the third priorities. Builders will often try and guess, right?
Mhm.
And
Or
it's
they
they're
weren't
off.
concerned. They just didn't care before because they were selling homes. Now that there's so much more of a focus on their customer experience because they're trying to have a competitive advantage over the next builder and their competition. But you mentioned that builder, mature builder, 3 times they went 3x in a short period of time. When
Yep.
is a builder ready to launch a customer experience platform? Should it be right from the beginning of when they're started, or should it be once they've hit a certain milestone?
So I work with low rise and high rise developers. And to me, I mean, I think you guys know my answer. It's never too soon.
Hmm.
And when I come in to assist, oftentimes my first consultation is they're already in harm's way or they're in crisis because they're either HICRA has been involved, the legislative authorities are involved, customers are ringing the phone off the hook. And then we sort of dig ourselves out backwards. And it could be a one community developer, or it could be a scale developer. They've just run into some problems. I believe, and when I sort of start my initial consultation with a company and their teams, it's important to start where you're at, but I will always look in. There has to be an intention to have the voice of the customer at every kind of decision that you're making throughout the organization. So if you're somebody that's only, delivering 100 homes or you're delivering 2,000 homes, there is a way to scale the customer experience model and platform to where, as you grow, you invest incrementally. The
Hmm.
ones that try and do it after the fact, you have to sort of dig out or reverse engineer those bad habits out of the organization. Sometimes it's the right idea, wrong execution. Like everyone in the organization is treat the, sort of company's money as if it's your own. But sometimes when you're saving a dollar, by ignoring a deficiency or a host of deficiencies and letting your customer be your quality control, you're going to end up with 10 times more deficiencies because you've lost their trust. They're going to be looking at everything under a magnifying glass. So someone might think you're saving $1, but you're really going to go back to the 110-100 rule. You're going to end up spending thousands. So when you asked me the size or when would I start bringing in platforms, I think one of the things is always have it as part of your conversation. Look at every single department and team's every role's contribution to it. Understand that inextricable link and interdependency to what's being delivered at the end result. I think the last thing I would add to that is one of the things I often start off with, I call it project life cycle, back to that virtuous circle, not a linear. I start off with looking at how do they deliver at this moment? What is their intention? And I try, Bryan, back to your point of being proactive. I will try and say, can we do that a month earlier? Can we do that 3 months earlier? What's the cost benefit of doing it that way? How do we help improve the impact to the homeowner and improve our ability to serve?
That was great. That was great. And I agree. I believe it's right from the beginning. How are you going to be able to compare yourself, over the years if you have no metrics to kind of understand anything, or if you don't have the team in place to track anything? Having that team is important, whether it's one person and then it grows to 5 people when you 3x your volume. I think it's just crucial to have from the beginning, like you said.
And training. I think that's often we get people in, and even in some of the when I was working full-time internally, when we would go through these big scale moments and have rapid growth, you would be bringing good people in from these other companies that had tremendous experience, but their model was not our model. And some of that first philosophy that you would have, I've used the words inspired, committed, extraordinary. Ritz-Carlton is legendary service. You have these kind of, let's call it even the language of each developer. Something as simple as, do I call it a unit or do I call it a home? Right. I hear people, do I call it a project or do I call it a community? Do I say handyman or do I say service tech? That's a low lift. That is not money things. This is what we call things tends to be how we relate to them.
Yeah.
French fry or pommes frites, Four Seasons versus McDonald's. Everything, when I talk about the intentionality of these kinds of, this thought process, it's really looking at every aspect. And I think sometimes we let our transactional processes or our engineered processes or things that are like, let's call it the bricks and mortar kind of mentality, cloud our judgment around something that's relational and experiential. And the two are very different, but they can be connected. And I often see developers have a million policies or trying to go at it this way. So I think some of it is first things first, look inward, understand the model you're that you can afford, that you can execute against, and then keep building on that model as you're scaling up and as you're evolving and investing in these bigger technology tools. But one of the things I would say is don't cheap out on your customer survey. Do it third party, do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, thank you so much for all those insights there. And kind of looking ahead, we've always preached, kind of like to Marco's point of, customer experience and how it's evolving and, how it should always be from the get-go, right? That doesn't necessarily happen all the time. In a perfect world, that's what should happen. Are you seeing, Danielle, like more executives kind of willing to invest in customer experience at this stage?
It's interesting when you say more developers, it tends to be the bigger ones that will do it. But as I mentioned to you, I think just as the rest of the world, customers transfer their experiences, whether buying a car, buying a coffee, or, sort of buying a home. And so customer expectations are never going down. We have greater legislation getting involved. We now have Tarion, at least in Ontario, and HCRA that's monitoring us. And I think some of it is people are waking up to the idea that it's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do to invest in customer experience. It's not only a strategic differentiator that goes back to what you said, loyalty and advocacy. I can spend less marketing dollars if I have homeowners out there advocating for me. I can save on operational effectiveness. I'm not hemorrhaging as much in terms of warranty response and costs if I design out the deficiencies through a very intentional quality model. I think, the industry is to a certain extent being dragged into it. I don't think it's our first thought. When JD Powers was here, I was sort of mortified to find, because they were able to compare the development industry, low rise and high rise residential, in with all their other categories. And we came in behind cellular phones.
Oh, wow.
And you can imagine where cellular phones fell in the pack of all those other industries, whether it's hotels, cars. And that was a bit of a wake-up call for, I think, a number of people in the industry who saw that. But I think the message still isn't all the way through. But I do think it's, again, because of the way the world is moving towards a much more customer-centric, human-centric
Hmm.
approach. I think you'll see more and more of it. And it'll be table stakes. It won't be an optional thing to have that focus on the customer.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, it was kind of leading up to my next question, which was whether you see sort of customer experience becoming more of a mandate in the next, 5 to 10 years. So to your answer there earlier, it looks like that certainly would be the case, right? From what you're seeing.
Absolutely. And I'd also almost say is that, a lot of the different issues, if developers aren't responding to customers, as an industry, it'll get legislated in. HCRA came into being as a result of the Cunningham report and a lack of attention of not the majority of the industry, but it was significant enough that we got additional layer of administration legislated in. And I would like to say, there's enough examples out there to show, Marco, you were asking me about the ROI. You get better ROI out of providing a customer experience or an outstanding customer experience. And yes, we have to change a little bit. The quality model, when I talk about it and go in and talk about having a number of inspections, it's like, oh, that's going to cost us more time and money. And it's not if we do it right, and not if there's no deficiencies. The
Yeah.
only time we'll add things in a quality model is if there are things that wouldn't pass the standard that we've set. So coming back to it, I think it's going to be a matter of necessity, Bryan. And I think the high performing builders, the ones that are going to be growing, will be the ones that adopt early.
Right.
And AI is coming on too. So just let's add another level of technology. I just was doing training using AI, and it was actually with a small team, a super small team. There was
Interesting.
only a team of 8 people, and a really clever leader. We were talking about leveraging technology, and they just showed me, I had 6 pages of training material, and they reduced it down to a 5-minute training video, all using AI, didn't pay talent. And they still need the paper, by the way. You still need the checklist. But
Hmm.
the idea that they were able to take that training and use AI to help train the entire team far better was huge. And I'm actually looking at something that would be helping post warranty. So AI is going to be here, guys. And if you're not looking at elevating your experience, you're going to be left behind, I think.
Of course.
For
And
sure.
and we hear this all the time where builders are like, how do your tools leverage AI? And there's a
Hmm.
lot of our competitors out there and they're like, yeah, we use AI, but really it's very basic and there's no real AI. We're working on implementing AI to automate things using the ERP, whether it's Newstar or Buildtopia. So that will be coming. But Danielle, we met when you went to go visit one of your customers and they had mentioned customer insight. And then you gave us a call and then we set up a lunch and we were just sharing, who you worked with and who we worked with. And you were working with so many people that, are using our ERPs here in Ontario. So what I did before this podcast was I reached out to a few of our customers and I asked them, what are some questions that you guys or some issues that you guys are experiencing that you'd like for us to ask Danielle? Um,
Yeah. Okay.
so we have a
The new
couple here.
segment.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
new
All
segment.
right. All right. The lightning
Some of
round.
them,
I'm ready
some of
for
them
it.
we snuck
Okay.
in, but we had a builder who said one of their biggest challenges today was homeowners closings are approaching and buyers are having difficulty coming up with the closing funds. There's a substantial funding gap between their appraisal value and the final purchase price. So when purchasers are unable to close, they're faced with a potential default, which entails a loss of all their deposits and subsequent legal ramifications. How would you and your team deal with this challenge when it comes to customer experience and communicating this with homeowners?
Hmm. So part of this is it's not just a consideration for one homeowner's challenge. So you're going to bring on, when you're looking at a default situation, you need to really understand what the genesis of this is. Do they not have money today, but they'll get it in 2 weeks? Or are they never going to be able to close? And I think, different builders in different financial positions have different options that they might be able to consider in front of them. I know for the most part, the way the industry is right now, it's not like the developer can take back that one home and resell it easily. A couple of things I would do is start communicating really early. I'm actually doing this with a few developers now. We start communicating our process for closing, our position on extensions, and our positions should you have issues or concerns about your closing, contact us, so we can start working on their issues earlier and we get the homeowners to self-identify how many of them are going to have an issue.
Gotcha.
Now, the second thing we try and do is try and make it easy for them to finance and connect up and leverage our relationship with our lenders. And I think this is probably an obvious one, but there's been a few people that have not necessarily set up programs or sub-programs. There's other mortgage brokers that are out there than the traditional, group of banks that we all go to that are providing levels of assistance to homeowners. Sometimes people have not thought about all the different options that could be available to them, or they're afraid, especially some of our first-time buyers. I think I always start off with the reason and then work my way outwards. So on a global side, I would cover having relationship with the banks. I would do bulk appraisals for sure, because that's one of the things. If I can remove and make it easy and convenient to do business with us, easy and convenient to close with us, this is something I would do even without the current market condition, but especially in this current market condition, make it so that the mortgage lender can understand the value and do the appraisal, not have to do a rigmarole there. Communicate early, flush them out earlier. And the other thing is, as brutal as this is, you owe them the honesty of what the steps are. They'll lose their deposit. You need to have that integrity, I'm going to say, with holding a strong policy for that kind of thing, or you'll undermine all your closings. So as tough as that is being fair and honest. And when you have those exceptions, they should be, let me go back to policy and process, have a really rigorous process that's outlined and written and everybody trained on. So everybody's saying something from the same song sheet. And that when you do have to move to tender and do have to default a homeowner, that it's done with compassion, it's done with empathy, but it's still, at the end of the day, you have to stay in business because you have to keep your commitments to all your other customers.
Gotcha. And yeah, that's a really
right
tough
to you?
thing to do. Yeah, it was
I
good.
think there's other tactics you can do, but I've had medical emergencies. Generally, it's got to be something that's severe extreme where you would really go for the deferral. Some developers can extend because they can afford to, but the majority can't right now.
Gotcha.
So that's a slippery slope. And if you're doing it for one, have a universal policy, but that's a sincere answer. Yeah.
That was perfect answer. Jumping to the next question. This was from a builder you've worked with as well. How do you ensure that your that digital customer experience, you mentioned portals, you mentioned, AI, how do you prevent losing the human touch, especially with such a high investment product like a new home? Automation has been desensitizing people more, which means they don't tend to pay attention to communication. And how can we get away from this in order to get the feedback that, the builder needs?
Mm-hmm. I would say that back to the idea of technology always has to have a strategy, and it does not replace the connection or the relationship. It helps you deliver on a better one. So when I am doing, it's high information and content that can be leveraged with technology, but still high touch in the right places and spaces. And when I say that, I would say, remember we were talking about using a good CRM and having key moments where I'm updating a customer. I don't necessarily have to pick up or do a personal email to remind someone of an appointment. I can leverage technology for that. And a homeowner doesn't mind that. In fact, it's a nice, helpful reminder. But sometimes it's the day after the PDI where I should maybe do a high touch personal phone call instead of an email, to say, hi, Marco, I know you had your pre-delivery inspection yesterday, just checking in to make sure you understand and understood everything, and that you have, if you have any questions. In that instance, that direct emotional connection is something that I would say technology can never replace. So to me, it's like that. I start off with every developer and I map their journey map in terms of every touch point in communication. And we'll talk to them about, oh, we can send an email. It can be automated. It can be worked on. It's like, no, time out. Back to the example, your customers, why they don't want to talk to you. If they can self-solve, they want to do it at midnight, access information, fill in a form, book a party room. But they want you where and how they need you. So it's balancing very intentionally that availability at the right time, in person, in the right way. And I do find a lot of developers will start leaning on technology too much and not drop the high touch relationship kind of moments. And that's a big mistake,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. We have so many questions that, our customers kind of asked here that they wanted input on. So we'll see if our customers really listen to the podcast, because a lot of them you've sort of answered throughout this whole podcast. They asked about, specific tactics that you've seen. They asked about, what sort of digital platforms or tools that they're utilizing. So maybe we just end off with one that's more fun, given your expertise in customer experience. Like, our audience wants to know, like, what excites you most about the future of customer experience in our specific industry, residential construction?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one.
I know.
I would say the shift in mindset. To think of it as, and Marco, I think this builds off of the last question you just asked me, or is that in a world, especially post-COVID world, where we are starving for deeper, more meaningful connections, is to think of your responsibility as not someone who's building bricks and mortar, delivering on a, sort of unemotional product. That's my sole responsibility. And thinking of yourself more as building community, and what is your bigger relationship, not just to that one customer in one home, in one lot, in one unit, in a condo, but more the interdependencies of things that would strike out within your specific development, but also the neighbors, how you tie into the community, how with very little effort you can leverage the work that you're doing within your development to have a better experience for your homeowners, but to have those new homeowners relate to their neighborhood better, to get a better start in their community. I see an opportunity in mature builders. One of the things I felt very in love with was sustainable development, smart technologies, corporate social responsibility, being able to have a bigger impact in a meaningful way that is what I would call beyond the build. In technology with AI, some of the things that we're able to do differently. What do they say? Every business is a technology business, a data business. Think of the kind of data home developers are in a position to collect through their portals and their platforms. Their ability to understand, behaviors, how they shop, when they shop, some of the things that I think are evolving around, a lot of people are the rental models that are coming in. Affordable housing is another one. I'm a big advocate. I just talked about social responsibility. Is I think housing is a right, shouldn't be a privilege. And in Canada, just the challenges we have. How can two things be true? We have an excess of housing and we don't have enough housing at the right level. So I think that's an exciting problem that we do have the ability to solve. And I think the industry's smart, and there's a lot of amazing developers out there and a lot of really great minds on it. So I think, shelter is a primary need, and community is a primary need. And the development industry, if we just looked at our role as a little bit more, expansive, I think what excites me is the ability to elevate somebody for low cost, oftentimes low change, but it's just that mental shift as I build a home versus I build something that's connected to something far greater than just myself in that one lot or that one condo or that one thing.
I think that's great. And I was just, in Europe, like Bryan mentioned earlier, and everyone was asking me, what do I do for work? And I was telling them, like, hey, like, I help builders with, their customer experience. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, what do you mean? What do I mean? Like, when you buy a new home, they're like, we don't buy new homes. Our homes are already built. So we have such a big opportunity here with, this free land that we can really, you go to Europe and you love it. You're like, it's beautiful here. Everything's laid out perfectly. We have a blank canvas. We can really paint it how we'd like. So I think
Yeah.
we should really focus on that. And,
Oh my gosh, it's as hard a time it is as it is in the industry. I think it's ushering in a level of change in the way we think of housing. And again, I went back to a renter is your next homeowner.
Mhm.
Some of these models that we're getting into, and some of the developers I've seen that have built traditional market condo, they think it's as easy to jump in the rental market as it like, okay, building a tower is building a tower. What's so different? And it is really different. Why is
Mm-hmm.
it different? It's going back to just the customer handling process, how all the agreements are. And it's some of this, kind of coming back to, I think this, I've always talked about it as less as a linear thing, going back to it's not something where someone gets on at the front end and gets off at the back. At least if you want to build more than one house or one community, it's a virtuous circle of advocacy and loyalty, Bryan, that you introduced at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never too late to jump into a better customer experience model, and sooner is always better. But we've got fun times ahead, I think, and some
For
really
sure.
interesting changes.
For sure. Before we let you go, Danielle, it's time for Marco and I's favorite segment, which
Oh
we kind of
no.
introduced. We sort of introduced this for the past couple episodes here at the Power to Build show. So it's called our guest 30-second quick fire. 5 rapid questions, no time to think, just go with your gut. Are
Okay.
you ready? Are you ready?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so what's your favorite brand experience outside of home building?
Hospitality in a hotel experience.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Do you want me to elaborate on that, or is
Yeah.
it?
Which
If you
hotel?
want,
Which
yeah.
hotel experience?
Oh my gosh. So I went to a hotel. It was in India. It was an eco hotel. I booked it in advance. They had sent me this, it was a package that was wrapped in a newspaper, and it was a local newspaper, and they had invested in local community. I got something that was physical, not digital, to remind me of my appointment and how, because I booked from Canada, they'd invested in something locally. When I arrived, they knew me by name. Very much rich and legendary service. There was hot tea that was available on in the room, suite of services that they had anticipated that I would be interested in, that was already booked for me. Because sometimes when you travel, you're already booked out for a massage.
Mm-hmm.
They had, and I have no idea how they do this, but they had given me a menu of pre-slated services that they'd already put in for me and my husband, that we were able to go to, but if we didn't want to, we just had to cancel. Oh my gosh, just a host of things, just to anything. I would say they anticipated anything that we could possibly want. So coordinating for the next day's activities, making everything easy and convenient for even before we arrived. I don't know, no detail
Oh, that's
was
great. That's great. Yeah.
not considered.
And what's one tool, digital or physical, that you can't live without?
Tough
My
one.
mouth.
No, that's
Oh
a
my
good
God.
one.
I don't know.
Okay.
Talking, building relationship. I don't know.
I think that's the other
Yeah,
one.
Well, I
Go
that's a
could
very
ahead.
pick up my
generic one.
phone if I could still talk to people, right?
That's
I
true.
just
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, to me, it's like the ability to communicate. I could do without a lot of things, but to be able to talk and explain and understand, it would
Of
be
Love that. Love that. If you weren't in the customer experience, what would you be doing?
you mean customer experience? I would probably be doing community development, sort of on that social engagement side, most definitely. In fact, I was evolving towards that.
Okay.
Nice.
What's one thing builders should stop doing immediately? What's something you've noticed that, they've been doing that every builder does, and you're like, this is wrong?
Yeah, they don't talk to their customers from the front end all the way to the back end. I was looking at somebody who said we can't afford to build a house, and when I looked at what they were building, they were doing all brick again. And I looked at who they were marketing to, and I was like, they all come from abroad, and they're not used to all brick housing. You're building all brick
Mm,
because that's what you think they want. You could take so much out of this budget by not assuming what they want. And it's interesting. I was at a seminar, and it was this is gonna, you guys are gonna laugh. It was a whole industry seminar, and they said, should we design and build for the end user? And I was sitting there practically choking, because why? As an industry, we've been building for an investor market, people who
yeah.
don't actually use our homes. And it's like, an investor wants something that they can. I had the best investor told me advice: I never invest somewhere that I myself wouldn't want to live, or invest in
Mhm.
something that I myself would not want to live in. So it makes me wonder how we end up with this situation that, we're overbuilt with the wrong product and the wrong things. So I think, yeah, design for the end user.
That
Don't
is
ignore
so
the
true.
customers. Talk to
Last
them.
but not least,
Yeah, sorry.
favorite quote or motto that guides your work? It's a tough one.
Do the right thing
That's a great one. That's a
at
good
all
one.
times in all ways. Yeah, I think, you can make a lot of mistakes, and again, people understand you, and I find this personally and professionally. But if you're thinking customers and developers, customers can always sniff out something that's disingenuine or know when you're avoiding them or deferring. If you share with them your challenges and your problems, they'll often ride with you on that. And to me, I've always been fortunate. I've never worked for anybody that, values first. Oh my God, people first. Andrea Delzato, I can all day long. And I've been very fortunate even now to work with the best of the best builders. We all will enter into challenges, and we'll all have industry issues, sometimes caused outside of our control. Sometimes it was within our control, but it's just a mistake. People are people, and we should never forget that. And if you want to be in for the long term, never sacrifice your integrity, always do the right thing.
That's awesome. Danielle, this has been an incredible conversation. Marco and I very much enjoyed, all your insights, and I'm sure, once the episode does launch to our audience, they're going to absolutely love everything that you say. So again, thank you so much for giving us some time of your day. Marco?
Yeah, no, Danielle, thank you. And thank you to our listeners as well. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more episodes of the Power to Build show. Danielle, I'm sure we'll chat soon, and I'll probably bump into you in one of my future meetings.
I look forward to it. And
So,
I
no,
will.
exactly. But thank you again.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Bryan. Thank you, Marco. I really
yeah,
enjoyed being here. Thanks for including me in the conversation.
Of course.
It's one
Bye,
we should
everyone.
keep having.
Exactly.